Would you say that Airbnb is done for?
That is a phenomenal question. This is a question that a lot of people are asking. And I anticipated you asking me that question, so I did some quick research. Rev Par is up 1.4% year over year. Available listings are up 14%. There are currently 1.5 plus million listings in the US. What's the current demand for short-term rentals? That's up by 12% year over year. Airbnb is not dead.
Could you explain what Rev Par is so that everyone knows what you're talking about?
Rev Par is revenue earned per listing, right? Per listing is what each listing is generating. So the average Rev Par, or a better word, because another one that's used a lot, is average daily rate. But average daily rate is a little different than Rev Par, because Rev Par is per the unit in general. But here's the number that people need to understand. And this is the number that a lot of people, when they analyze a deal, they don't take this into account. Rev Par currently is $177.44, right? So now, again, this is national, so we have to take this into account. So you really have to get into the nitty-gritty based on your particular region. So, for example, South Florida, where majority of my properties are. Here is Rev Par for South Florida. South Florida, it is the average Rev Par is $227, right? Now, why is that important? That's important because people that got into the game within the last year or so, and again, depending on what market you're in, so let's just use South Florida, for example. South Florida, what in the last, especially 2 years, but within the last year, what happened to the market? The prices skyrocketed, right? I think you did a phenomenal video on Instagram that I saw that I loved, was where you talked about what the medium household priceage is, and it's crazy. It's remind me, it's about 700.
So the median price is $550, and the average sales price in Miami-Dade County is $852,000.
There you go. Okay, so here's why you need to be very careful, right? Let's just take the median price in the 500,000 mark. To be profitable, right? You have to take that number into account that I just gave you, $225 a night, right? And then you have to figure out what the average occupancy rate for that neighborhood is, etc. So occupancy rate currently nationwide is 56%. So you take those numbers, you do the math, and then you can figure out whether or not it's feasible to buy at that peak market. Now, there's a lot of things that go into it. I don't want to dive too deep. We just started the conversation, but understand that Airbnb is not dead. How people have been getting into the game, that's dead. Because the way people have been doing it is all wrong. You know, the days of just putting anything on the market, whether it's a real estate sale or not, are gone. Meaning putting something on the market and it's going to sell. Those days are gone, right? As a realtor, you have to be more skilled today than you were 2 years ago. And as a short-term rental operator, you have to be much more skilled if you want to be successful today than you did 2 years ago.
I think it's just, right, being aware of what your expectations are. Because if you purchased a property 2 years ago, you paid a lot less for it. Yep. The rents were higher back then. The rules of the game have changed, right? Prices are higher. Rents are probably lower. And that's a question I have for you is, let's say today versus a couple years ago, was the Rev Par higher then than it is now?
No, actually, again, the Rev Par is higher, 1.4%. But is that increase enough to cover the difference in the price? It's not. That's where the disconnect is. Rev Par is higher, but it's not high enough to cover the expenses that you have today that you didn't have a couple years back.
Right, because the values have just gone up so much that it may not compensate. I mean, if you think of the average sales price being $852,000, if somebody puts down 5%, right, they're financing, let's say roughly 8-10, that mortgage payment all in is probably going to be somewhere around $7,500.
Yep.
Right. And the question is, if you just purchase that average property at that average sales price of $852, can you even get $7,500 long-term rent? Right? Probably not.
No. Yeah. And not in today's market. It hasn't caught up. Now, not to get off a tangent here because we want to focus on short-term rentals, but I hear this all the time from a lot of people. Oh, there's going to be a real estate bust. We're going to see a decline in sales, decline in prices of homes. And the reality is we're not. We haven't seen it. And the reason why we haven't seen it, it's the same reason why short-term rentals are still not dead, is because the demand to purchase is still there, regardless of the fact that things are expensive, regardless of the fact that mortgage rates are super high. If you're in the right location, people still want to go there. Miami, South Florida, people are still moving here by the droves, right?
Right.
Short-term rentals, people are still coming here. The demand in South Florida has increased year over year for the last 10 years for short-term rentals because people are just coming here either on vacation, now more so for business. During COVID, even though I don't count those years, Florida was the only place open, So it's a supply and demand thing. We're not going to see what we saw in 2007.
Right.
The factors are not the same.
I mean, don't even get me started on the market, because that could be another podcast all in of itself. The insanity in South Florida, right? What's been happening here ever since COVID. So just to give some quick background, right, to our audience on who Fernando David is. He owns a property management company. He personally owns over 100 short-term rentals, and he manages over 200 rentals. And those properties, for the most part, they're short terms. And one thing I want to mention is that when we say Airbnb today, we're referring to short-term rentals in general, right? So we're using them, bouncing back and forth. So my goal today, Fernando, is to share with our audience a couple things. One is how they can get the most out of their existing Airbnb. And the second is going to be for those who haven't had a chance to invest, they're considering investing, maybe some ways of starting, right, absolutely from the beginning, and giving them some ideas, some pointers on how to get off on the right foot. So with that being said, would you say that there are any hacks or tips that somebody can consider when jumping into their first short-term rental?
Oh man, there's a ton of hacks or tips, but let's break it down a little bit more in terms of, because I get this question all the time. What type of property should I buy for a short-term rental? Now, the answer to that question is I don't look at the type of property that I need to buy. I look at, am I getting a deal, right? Because as we discussed already, the real estate market is insane. If I'm going to overpay for a property, it doesn't matter what property it is, you're not going to make money on it because you overpaid for it, right? So I first look at what can a property generate. So once I figure out what that property can generate, or the area, the neighborhood, what is the average revenue in that neighborhood, then I can decide whether or not I'm going to buy in that neighborhood or whether or not I could buy in that neighborhood. Because I can tell you today, I can't. There's certain areas I can't buy. I cannot. I can't buy. Let's use Fort Lauderdale, for example. I can't buy in Harbor Isles because even if I get a property at a discounted rate, Harbor Isles, that market needs to crash by more than 50% in order for me to make money in that market, right? Now, I can still buy in other areas because, especially if I get a deal on the property. For example, I can buy in Plantation, I can buy in Davie, I can buy in West Fort Lauderdale because there's still properties there that I can get at a price point that still makes it profitable. That kind of makes sense.
So you bring up a good point, because I guess the prerequisite before we even speak about Airbnb hacks, right, would be getting the deal, period.
Right.
Right. Because if you don't get a deal, nothing makes sense. Long term, short term, it doesn't really matter what kind of property you buy, you may potentially be in trouble, right? Especially somebody who's purchasing in this market that we're living in today. If you don't have a solid deal, right, it could be the recipe for a disaster.
Correct.
So let's say that somebody does have the right property, right? The numbers make sense. What could they do to their property to perhaps, generate more guests, right? Make it more appealing.
All right. So again, and I'm going to give you stuff that I look for because the stuff that that have been proven based on my experience to work. The number one area, and the first thing that I look at before even considering purchasing the property is the outdoors. What kind of backyard? What kind of front yard? What kind of outdoor does the property have? Because that is the number one, the highest ROI you're going to get on your investment is going to be on the outside, not the inside.
So when you say the outside, and I'm asking this question because when I first met you, I probably picked your brain for about an hour and a half, as far as to what I thought was the best and ideal property and all of that, which we'll get into that in a moment. But when you say the outside, are you referring to like activities that they can do in the property? Are you referring to a swimming pool? I mean, what amenities on the outdoors would you say that someone can get the biggest bang for their buck with a return, with guests being attracted to it?
I like to use the word utility. It needs to be functional, right? It needs to be usable. The outside needs to be inviting. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a pool. In fact, I'm against pools. They're costly to maintain. Guests are always going to complain about the temperature of the water, or the water's dirty or not.
Too cold? It's too cold, too hot.
Too cold, too hot. A leaf is in the pool. We're in South Florida. Iguanas love to hang around pools. They when an iguana poops around the pool, they think it's something else. Anyways, but the key to the outside is its utility and functionality, right? It needs to be functional, and you see something that it's inviting to someone. So to give you a couple of ideas, like when we did your property, that you have that covered area, a fan. It's a nice outdoor furniture. It's a place that people can go outside, drink some coffee, drink some wine in the evening, socialize, and just spend time outside rather than spending time inside. Because people, when they go visit a property, they don't necessarily want to be inside. They want to be outside.
And depending on the time of the year in South Florida, you may not want to be on the outside anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, one thing I have on the outside of one of the properties is the Jenga, right? To make sure you have the grill and all the things that the accessories that they would need for the grill. So yeah, they definitely want to enjoy some time outdoors. So as far as to, what someone can put inside the house, right? We spoke about the outdoors. What do you recommend on the inside of the property?
Well, there's two big things that you need to have on the inside. Well, let me go through in terms of amenities, right? For me, the number one thing right now, the number one searchable item on the inside is office space. It doesn't have to be a dedicated room, but you got to have a desk or someplace where people can work on either if they're remote workers, if they're families that have got kids, because we're seeing a lot more people extending their vacation and keeping their kids out of school, and they need a place to do their homework, etc. But a workstation is critical. That's number one, right? The second thing is you got to have an awesome coffee station. And there's no reason why you shouldn't today, because nice coffee machines are inexpensive today. Back when I started, you could have, a nice espresso machine, a nice coffee maker, and all that would cost you in the thousands of dollars. For less than $1,000, you can create an awesome coffee station. And I think that's going to be number two. And then, along with the office space, gotta have, and I don't know why some people don't do this, you can't go cheap on your internet. Your internet needs to be prime, high speed, the highest speed available. Again, today it's not super expensive anymore to get top-notch internet, but those are the three things that you got to have on the inside if you want to be competitive.
Correct. I mean, if you think about internet speed nowadays, it's probably what, 30, 40, $50 for a couple hundred megs, right, per second. And if you go all out and have like a gig speed, which is ridiculously fast, it's probably like 70, $80, or depending on the market the person's in. But
correct. Again, I always like to talk about ROI, your return on investment. Where should you put your money in to get the highest return? Man, $80 for a high-speed internet to keep your guests super happy. You can't quantify that return.
One thing that I think about amenities when I had my first short-term rental out there, the first thing I thought to myself is, what would I want? Right? Like, what would I want to see? Would I want the coffee station? Would I want the snacks, the Pop-Tarts, the tea, the different types of little, those little espresso, what do you call those little pods, right? Those little coffee pods. I'd like to see multiple flavors. So what would I want all around, right? Would I want a kitchen that's nice? Would I want an updated kitchen? And I thought to myself, that's the experience I want my guests to have, is something that when they step in, they feel like, wow, this is really nice, right? When they walk in, they say to themselves, you know what? We picked the right property. I wasn't bamboozled, right? I didn't get tricked into the photos in leading me to believe it's something that it really wasn't. So again, that's my goal. One thing I want to mention is I was at Sunny Isles a couple weekends ago, and I did a video on Instagram where I said, this is the time, right, to try to do like a staycation if you live in South Florida, if you're traveling from abroad, because the rates are extremely low. So anyhow, in the room, they had behind the toilet, they had this little sign that said, make sure that whatever you throw in this toilet is like human waste or something completely foul. It was like taped on, right? And I'm thinking, what is this, right? How do you have this experience for your guests of the garbage bag had like holes in it? There was no coffee machine, right? A lot of the basics weren't there. I asked for a crib, which I didn't really need a crib for my 4-year-old, but like a pack and play type of thing. And they left the crib in the closet, like a full blown crib that needed to have like 16 screws put in, no bed sheets. Right. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? And it's just, the list went on and on, right? No paper towels, no napkins. There wasn't a garbage in the kitchen. There wasn't coffee cups. So I thought to myself, wow, this is interesting, right? It's like, this is what I, as a guest, would not want. And I could have really trashed the owner of that property online. I said, you know what? I sent them a message because they asked me for a review. I'm like, call me back. I really need to speak to you. So I spoke to the person. I unloaded on them. I said, look, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just being real with you. What you have done with this short-term rental is extremely unacceptable, right? I said, one is, are you the owner or do you just manage it? He said both. I said, you need to work on the service, the experience that somebody's receiving when they get to your property, because this is not the experience you're looking for. But anyhow, that's me going on my rant on amenities, right? On what people would like.
Yeah. But you're 100% right. Here's the bad side or where the service is, where this industry needs to go, right? For a long time, and you can probably relate because it's the same thing as a realtors, we all experience the same thing. For a long time, the short-term rental industry was not professionalized. Anybody could put because you could literally make money putting anything on Airbnb and make money. So people got lazy. People don't realize how hard it is to gain a customer, but because they were getting plenty of customers. But you're going to see, and we saw it somewhat in 2023, but we're definitely going to see it a lot in 2024. You're going to see a lot of people, and one of the reasons why my numbers keep going up in terms of my acquisition of additional properties, and I'll touch on this in a second, but let me finish my train of thought. You're going to see a lot of these mom and pop operators, a lot of these pop-up management companies that just did it because it was easy money. They're going to go to the wayside. They're going to be gone. So, and I'll close with this because it's what's happened to me, right? One of the reasons why month over month, I've been increasing my portfolio, not just personally, but in terms of the properties that I'm managing, is because all these, not what I refer to as non-professionals, are getting out of the game because they can't make money anymore. They can't keep doing what this guest or this host did to you and expect to be viable in the future. They're understanding that and they're getting out of the game. So I've been receiving tons of, in fact, just the last week, we acquired a management company. It was a startup company. They only had 5 properties in their portfolio. But I got the phone call saying, hey, we don't want to do this anymore. They've only been in the game for 6 months. Don't want to do this. It's not what we thought. Do you want our properties? And normally I would pay to take those properties, take those contracts out. Mm-hmm. I got them for free. I said, no, I'm not really interested, but if you need the help, I'll help you. But, and they're like, no, I need you to do it because these people are counting on us. So I said, I'll take over, but, I'm not paying for anything. So, and then
right. And I think it's kind of twofold. One would be the management company that says to you, right, I want out. This isn't what I thought it was. And second is, I'm sure you're going to start seeing a lot of property owners, period, looking for more professional management companies to assist them with the process.
Our phones are off. They've been off the hook lately from that set. Owners calling us saying, hey, I'm not happy either with my current property management company because their numbers have dropped. And when they visit their property is not what they gave the property, how they gave it to the management company. And the other one is the mom and pops. They're going out. So in both aspects, now I'm at the point in my career that I'm not looking to acquire more management properties anymore. I am looking to acquire more real estate, but I'm not looking to acquire more management. So we're being kind of very selective on which properties we're currently taking on. And we kind of shifted our model to more of a what's called co-hosting type model. Okay. But just to give you an example, so 2 months ago, I only had 163 properties. Maybe I think it was 2 months ago, 163 properties under management. I'm at over 200 properties in 2 months. So in a few months, I added another 50-something properties. So,
when you say co-host, could you explain what you mean by co-hosting being somewhat of a model that you're looking into?
Okay, so
expanding on
in our industry, there's a lot of ways to make money, right? For me, the primary one, and it's the one that I started with, it's the one that I think you can actually build wealth on, is when you own the asset, right? When you own the property is yours, and then you turn that property into a short-term rental. That is, for me, the number one. That's how I started. That was my goal from the beginning. I got a pretty decent portfolio. I got a good reputation. So other people started calling me to manage their property. So that's where the property management side of the house comes in. Now that is like with yourself, with your property, you called us. Now we're managing the property. So that's the property management side. There's 2 other ways to make money. One I totally hate, which is the rental arbitrage game, where I actually lease the property from a landlord, and then I take that property and I turn that property into a short-term rental, and I operate it as a short-term rental. Worst model, don't recommend it. I don't even want to touch on it. I don't want people to even go there. I can't tell you how many people have lost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars trying to do that. Mm-hmm. And you have people, quote unquote experts, will try to sell you programs, tell you that that's the best thing since sliced bread. Doesn't work. And I've done plenty of videos on that, so I'm not going to touch on that. But the next one, which is what we're going to now, is more of a co-hosting model. And what the co-hosting model is that you are trying to be a property manager, or you have a portfolio of properties that you want to convert into short-term rentals. All we're doing is we're going to handle your administrative side of the house. You handle operations, but we're going to handle your marketing and we're going to handle your admin. And that's what we're gearing more towards because for several reasons, but the main reason is because I don't want more employees. So with this model, I eliminate that because I'm working with the owner. The owner handles operation. The owner is going to handle their team, but we will handle the marketing and the administrative side of the house. And more particularly, we're handling more the guest services. So
correct. So like the booking, the phone calls, the questions, the dates, getting them access to the property, the combination to the door, all of that stuff, right? The reviews.
Correct.
And they would handle the actual handyman. If the towels get stained, whatever the case is, right? They would handle the physical part of the replenishing whatever needs to be done in the property. Because I guess you're also limited, right? In the sense of where if you're in South Florida and somebody lives in Wichita, right? And you don't have a team set up over there, co-host seems like the most logical option for you. It's probably less profitable, but less complicated at the same time.
Correct. 100%. And, so let me touch on two things you just said. So one is, by switching to this model, I've gone, I have the ability to go worldwide, right? So it expands my portfolio. So, and one of the reasons why I actually started doing it is because we started creating small teams nationwide. Like, for example, we have a team in California, we have a team in Tennessee, we have a team in Georgia. But then this is when I realized, man, managing people, especially remotely, managing people is hard to begin with. But when you're trying to manage a team remotely, it's even harder. So we realized, hey, I don't want to continue down that path. So we started feeling out to see if we can get more of the co-hosting contracts, and we did. So those co-hosting contracts, for example, we have contracts on Louisiana and New Orleans, New Jersey, Connecticut, Canada, and Toronto. So it allows me to, again, be more international without having to bring on more people.
Right, because it'd get extremely labor intensive, right? I'm sure just in South Florida, the amount of people that you have that are having to manage the properties, people having to physically go out, replacing door locks if the combination breaks, right? All of these things that just happen to people, right? It becomes, you have to have a heck of a workforce to take care of it. So the co-hosting definitely makes sense. Fernando, what would you say is your strategy for optimizing, right? Trying to get as much rents as possible in, this off season, right? Because I'm sure this off season it could be somewhat of a blow to the property owner who's expecting year-round income.
Yeah. So there's a couple of key strategies that we try to do, and we do this year-round. It's not just specifically now, but here's one of the biggest advantages that I have over other people or other management companies. Number one, I've been in the game for a long time. So I have an extensive emailing list that I can tap into to get repeat customers to come in. So we focus a lot on that, right? The second one that I focus a lot on is in my social media. I don't have hundreds of thousands of followers, but I think we're over 15,000 followers on Instagram, another several thousands on YouTube and TikTok. But these followers are active followers. So they go to my channel specifically because I have properties and I'm constantly getting people asking me, hey, I'm going to go to Colombia. I'm going to go to California. Do you have any properties? And we're marketing to those people. But that's on a little bit on the marketing side. But in addition to that, I'm a firm believer in being multi-channel. I try to get on in fact, if there's a channel I can get on, I'm going to be on it. So, and then on a side note, one of the things that I think it's really, really, I think it's going to be a big game changer is the fact that Google is investing a lot of money in Google Travel. So our properties are on Google Travel, and we're starting to see an uptick in reservations coming from Google Travel. Now, the interesting part about Google Travel, though, is that Google, for example, there's a couple of companies that Google has teamed up with. One of them is a company called WinStay, WHIM Stay. That company, or at least in my case, because when I check on where we're being advertised, we found this connection. That company, for whatever reason, got the contract with Google because all their properties are on Google Travel. So if you're on Wednesday, they're going to promote it on their platform, but they're also going to promote it on Google.
So when you say multi-channel, you're not referring to social media platforms. You're talking about places where you could market the short-term rentals.
Yeah, correct. So just to give you some of the ones that I know off the top of my head, because there's so many now. But, you have the common ones: Verbal, Booking.com, Airbnb, Wednesday I just mentioned. Marriott Homes and Villas is another very big one. To get on there, you need there's a criteria and certain requirements you have to have. But I think Marriott Homes and Villas is a great platform to be on if you can get on it. Then we have a platform called Nomads that caters to the nomad community. I love that platform because most of my reservations that come into that platform are nomads. It's usually one or two people. They'll rent out an entire house and they'll stay there for 3 or 4 weeks, sometimes 2 months. And all they do is work in their little office. So I love that community. I'm a big fan of them. So we cater a lot to the nomad community. But that's what I mean. Like I said, in the last couple of years, that industry has exploded. I think it's going to downsize because I don't think that it can handle. Like, for example, there was a company that we were with they no longer exist. It's called Florida Vacation Rentals or something like that. It was a platform that catered just to Florida. They couldn't survive. So you're going to see a lot of these smaller ones either get bought out from the bigger ones. But the point is there's a lot. And there's niche, like Mr. B&B. Most people don't know what Mr. B&B is unless you're part of the LGBT community, right?
Okay.
So we have a lot of houses in What Matters. And that's how I found out about that platform. They have a very loyal customer base. So we're on that platform and we get a lot of reservations on that platform from the LGBT community.
You mentioned the again, talking about the multi-channel and Marriott, that to date has been the best guest that I have had as far as to profitable, right? I mean, It was like a 45-day stay, and I'm going off of memory, but I believe that was like a $15,000 stay, right, from the Marriott. So you having that connection with that channel, thank you. Thank you for that guess. And I thank you for, again, constantly looking for the channels, right, that are most profitable for your guests. Because if it works for you, obviously you're going to pass that right on to your people, right? Correct. So that is awesome. Yeah. I want to talk to you briefly, and I don't mean to geek out or get on that tip as far as to regulations, but as far as to licensing requirements, right? What are the licensing requirements? And I know that I'm not expecting you to go state by state and county by county, right? All I can really talk to you about is South Florida, and then whoever's in a different market, you'd have to find out in your market, right? Like what short-term rentals, lodging, whatever requirements you have. But in South Florida, what are the typical licensing requirements?
Well, there's 3 licenses. There's 3 things you have to do in South Florida. And depending on the city, not every city has it. Like you just mentioned, like, for example, Davie, for a long time had 0 regulations in terms of short-term rentals. The city of Sunrise still has 0 regulations. But the first license you have to get is a license through DBPR, Department of whatever abbreviation is.
Correct. Department of Business and Professional Regulations. So that would be the state, right? On That's the state level. You mentioned Davie and Sunrise, though. So is there not any type of county requirement? Because I know that my property in Dade, no, there isn't a I take that back. I'm an unincorporated Miami-Dade, and they do require an occupational license. So Dade requires the occupational. Then you have the state, and I think that would be it.
So, and going in hierarchy, you have the state license. You're going to have a county license, but that county license is really not anything. It has nothing to do with the short-term rental. That county license, it's an occupational license because they consider it a business. So regardless of whether or not any type of business you have, you're going to have to get that county license. So I don't really consider that a short-term rental license, but it is an occupational license you have to get through the county. And then some cities will require an additional occupational license for the short-term rental, specifically for short-term rental. So, for example, Fort Lauderdale being one of them, where you'll have to get a city occupational license to operate as a short-term rental, and they'll come and inspect the property. But in practicality, there's three things you need to get: a state, DBPR. Now, I get the question: what classifies or what makes it a short-term rental? Here's what makes it a short-term rental. If you rent your property for, I'm going to screw up probably the days or the amount of times. If you rent your property for more than 4 or 5 times in a calendar year for less than 30 days, you are classified as a short-term rental. If it's 30 days or more, you don't need to get a license because you're not classified as a short-term rental.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure about the times per year, but I was confident in saying that 30-day mark, right? That's the one, the gauge on considered short-term rental or not.
Yeah.
So I purchased an investment property in the city of Miami, and all I got to say is, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I thought to myself, great.
With you, I told you, it's tough.
Right. I'm like, yeah, I got a great deal. This is going to be the perfect property for Airbnb. It's got the guest quarters in the back. It's got the house. This is going to be the most amazing property. And I said, I'm not sure if it was you or somebody else. You may want to check out the city of Miami and see what the specific zoning is with lodging. Because city of Miami, if I'm not mistaken, what they have is they call it lodging.
Yeah.
So when you look at this lodging and you look at probably, if you break down all the different areas in the city of Miami, I want to say 97% of the city of Miami, you cannot put it on a short-term rental. There's some kind of lawsuit that's been ongoing for years.
Yep.
So you can't put it short-term rental. And one thing, and again, continuing with that thread. So city of Miami allows it if you're like on a main street or a main avenue, which most houses are not on 8th Street or 27th Avenue or 17th Avenue or something, right? So that rules out most properties.
Yeah, it rules out most property, but it's not necessarily Main Street. So I'm going to give you an example. We have a house in Brickell.
Okay.
And the house in Brickell, it's not on the main drag.
Right.
But our house is on the south side of the street. So
Correct.
We can do short-term rentals. Anybody on the north side of the street can't.
That is crazy.
It's insane.
That's crazy. That's crazy. And I've seen it to where, again, if it's a main street, they'll allow like a street behind or in front, right? They'll allow, there's like a little buffer sometimes, but for the most part, people don't really fall in that. And one pet peeve that I have is when real estate agents, when they put in the description, especially when the property is in the city of Miami, awesome Airbnb property. And it's not legal where they have this property, right? So it's like you're marketing a certain amount of revenues that if the person that purchases the property, if they try getting it licensed the way that most owners should, they realize that they can't even get those rents that they're being promised in the MLS remarks, which I feel is just extremely misleading, right, to the public.
It is misleading, and it's misleading, but I'm going to say, and I'm going to probably, I could be wrong. It's just a theory, man. I would say the majority of the realtors are just ignorant to the fact that you can't. They don't realize that you can't just, turn anything into a short-term rental. They don't have, they're a little lazy and they don't want to do the research. And they're ignorant of that fact that they can't do that. Because I see it a lot. Going back to what I said about how so many people are getting out of the game, That's why if you go on the MLS today, and I don't know the numbers, I'm just going to guess, throw out some crazy number out there. But I would say probably more than 50% of the listings, you'll see in that description, great for investors, could be a great Airbnb.
Right.
I mean, I see that more and more today than ever before. And a lot of them are Airbnbs that are being sold or trying to be sold. In fact, like I said, my acquisitions are higher today because I bought several short-term rentals from other owners that failed in the game. I bought them and I turned them around to be successful short-term rentals.
Wow. So, Fernando, I'm not even going to lie to you. I haven't even asked you half of the questions that I want to ask you for today, right? So I greatly appreciate the time that we spent today. We're going to definitely have to do a second episode. And I thank you for your time. And Fernando, just to mention some of your services, if you could briefly tell the audience what it is that you're looking for, right? I mean, like, who's your ideal client, right? Who's your ideal client and who do you feel that you can help the best?
Well, just a little bit about our company. We are a real estate asset management company. So even though we focus on short-term rentals, we do have in our portfolio long-term rental properties. But my ideal customer is an owner or an investor that is looking to generate revenue, or the priority is revenue. We no longer take, or we try to shy away from properties in which the owner bought it as a second home. They want to use it and just try to get a little extra money when it's not in use. That's not my ideal customer because they're going to want to put restrictions and stuff on me that is going to just hurt the listing, and I'm not going to make money on that. So that's not my ideal customer. I want an investor or an owner that wants to make money on their property.
Okay. So one thing that just occurred to me is if our audience wants to comment down below on what questions they have for you, maybe on our next podcast, we can hit some specific scenarios, right, on any specific questions that somebody may have. And as far as somebody, if they want to reach you, Fernando, where and how can they reach you?
I'm all over social media. You can find me under my company name, which is PMI Premium Services. My handle on my Instagram, which is the one I use the most, is at Fernando at PMI Premium Services, but the at is AT, not the at sign. So the at sign, Fernando AT Premium Services is my handle for Instagram.
Awesome. So anyone in our audience who's watched this episode, if you can comment down below on what you'd like us to chat about next time, and also what your takeaways were. Is there anything that Fernando shared with you that you can implement and hopefully make some more money, or any other nuggets that you benefited from today? So Fernando, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.
My pleasure.